Hey there, e-commerce Fastlane listeners. I want to take a quick moment and give a shout out to an amazing sponsor, Absolute Web. Now, if you're looking for a powerhouse team to take your Shopify store to the next level, then look no further. Absolute Web is a full-service design and e-commerce development agency. They've been pushing the boundaries of what's possible on Shopify for over 2 decades. Now, whether you need a highly customized design that truly sets your brand apart, a complex integration to kind of streamline your operations, or even a complete site implementation from the ground up, Absolute Web has got you covered. Now, they have an in-house team of UI and UX designers. They have architects. They really are the go-to all-in-one solution for e-commerce brands that really want results and they want them now. And get this, if you're currently on another platform and you're considering to make the switch to Shopify, the experts at Absolute Web have deep experience in migrations too. They'll make the process smooth and painless, and you can start reaping all the benefits of being on Shopify. So if you're ready to build, optimize, or even scale a high-converting e-commerce storefront, head on over to absoluteweb.com and you can learn more about their extensive technical and creative e-commerce services. That's absoluteweb.com. And now back to the show.
You're listening to E-commerce Fastlane, the podcast show to help you build, manage, grow, and scale a successful and thriving company, powered by Shopify. Listen to real conversations with partners and subject matter experts as they share proven practical strategies, platforms, and the best Shopify apps to help you accelerate your business. The time is now for you to improve efficiencies, grow revenue, profit, and lifetime customer loyalty. Please welcome your host, startup founder and strategic advisor, Steve Hutt.
Welcome back to E-commerce Fastlane. I'm your host, Steve Hutt. Thanks so much for tuning in today. There's so many podcasts out there to choose from, and both in marketing and direct-to-consumer and Shopify. And I just massively appreciate the fact that you're picking today's episode. You're going to gain a lot of insights, a lot of inspiration, all around the exit from your Shopify store. It's an interesting topic that a lot of people don't really think about. As you start growing your business and you get product market fit and things start scaling upwards of $5 million and $10 million, and all of a sudden, this is a real business that's making impact and giving a lot of great products out to the world. It's interesting though to know that, well, if all of a sudden, if push comes to shove and you're like, hey, I've had enough of this business, or I wonder what the business is worth if I was to sell it, maybe move on to another opportunity that you might have. That's what we're going to learn today. So my guest is Emmett Kilduff. He's the co-founder and CEO of a company called the Fordia Group. Now, the Fordia Group, what they are is they're an investment bank, and they exclusively focus kind of in the e-commerce space, and they provide kind of a unique service for entrepreneurs really looking to kind of exit their businesses. So really sets them apart. Part of it is their team's extensive kind of Wall Street experience. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Emmett himself, he actually worked for Morgan Stanley and they're one of the largest kind of M&A firms in the world. And I think a lot of this expertise combined with them being focused exclusively in the e-commerce sector really has kind of positioned them as go-to advisors. It's really unique what they do. They even have an annual conference that we're going to talk about too, that they have a group of acquirers that all get together annually. And there's 130 or 150 C-suite executives that are really ready with money to acquire. But the whole idea is the Fordia Group is there to kind of nudge you along in the right direction to make sure that you're getting all your ducks in a row, starting early and preparing that this exit could happen in the future. So, hi Emmett, welcome to E-commerce Fastlane.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
My pleasure. Thank you. I know our time zones are a little bit wacky. I believe you're in London time right now, I believe. And I'm here in Vancouver, and I appreciate the hustle to make this all work today. So what's the real inspiration behind the Fordia Group? Why are you exclusively focusing on e-commerce entrepreneurs to help maybe navigate potential exits?
So I learned, I've always been interested in e-commerce, Steve. I did a master's in e-commerce way back in 1999. So showing my gray hair there a little bit.
No video today, but I agree.
Yes. So for the last 25 years, I've had an interest in e-commerce. At the time, I went to work in the world of investment banking for initially Credit Suisse and latterly Morgan Stanley. So I went to learn how the world of investment banking worked, including mergers and acquisitions and so on. But I've always had an interest in e-commerce. And eventually, 4 or 5 years ago, I began to see a gap in the market to bring a Wall Street level of deal making or service down to a small and medium-sized e-commerce entrepreneurs. And I like that gap in the market. I often say internally to my colleagues that we want to become the Morgan Stanley for e-commerce. That's our big, ambitious vision. And so we're bringing that white glove, intense, thoughtful, experienced advice from Wall Street down to the grassroots of e-commerce and helping e-commerce entrepreneurs ultimately get the best deals.
Right. And then, so as part of the service of the 48 group, so there's the M&A part of it. And then I think, are there other things about just capital in general, if a brand is not quite ready for exit, but there's some capital requirements for inventory or marketing or other kind of brand expansion, are there services available through partnerships through the 48 group that can maybe facilitate something like that?
Yeah, see, the three core services of an investment bank are equity, credit, and M&A. Right now, being really honest, equity is incredibly tough. Ever since the iOS changes, 2.5 years ago, a lot of the venture capital firms have been not following their money or are not investing new money into e-commerce. So it's tough on the equity side. Credit is slightly easier, and M&A is tough, but there are deals getting done.
Yeah.
So, I've seen a few cycles over the years since the year 2000 when I started investment banking, and when interest rates come down in the next few months, that'll be a good catalyst for increased deal flow, whether it's equity, credit, or M&A. An interesting stat is M&A has never gone down for more than 2 years in a row, and it's been down for 2 in the last 2 years. So, barring something very unusual, M&A volumes should increase again this year.
Nice. That's interesting. So, I mentioned at the top of the show that I believe that like a lot of Shopify store owners really are probably not thinking about their exit strategy at all. They're there just kind of heads down, kind of growing their business. But at some point, I think in the journey, even in my own journey with Vision Pros, there was at some point 2 or 3 years into it and things really started scaling up. It's like, hey, wonder what an exit could possibly look like. And so can you talk a little bit about that and about preparing early? And are there any specific steps that you believe entrepreneurs should take now just so that their businesses are much more attractive, when there's a potential acquisition down the road?
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest mistakes I see when I work with large firms around the world at the Wall Street level. They are planning their exits at least 1 to 2 years out. There's a lot of planning goes in, and therefore we're trying to, as a firm, encourage smaller businesses in the e-commerce sector to emulate best practice and prepare early. We, Steve, have an 8-stage exit process, and the first stage of that is something we call early preparation. It's the longest stage, and it's the stage that has the most impact ultimately on valuation. So just to walk you through maybe some of the key steps in what we see in early preparation.
Right.
We see 5 steps. The first is the advisors chosen by the company need to do a deep analysis of things like their financials, their platforms, the data they get from the Shopify, Amazon Seller Central, etc., and really get a deep understanding of the business. Then we do something which is all based around the concept that no battle plan, survives contact with the enemy. So there's no point you or I or a board of an e-commerce company coming up with a great strategy if they don't get feedback on that from ultimately the people that will buy the business. They're the enemy, right? And so a big part of what we do is really get a good grip at understanding the business and then articulate it succinctly in a very short 1 to 2 page teaser and get that in front of some of the people we may ultimately buy, the client's business. And that could be some strategics, some private equity firms, some family offices, etc. And that's really critical because then we get this really valuable feedback and we integrate that into our advice to the client on what they can do, what changes they can make on a short, medium, long-term basis that ultimately will result in a higher valuation.
Right. One thing I learned too a lot is even with my own media company, and, people have kind of bumped into me and said, hey, like, is there ever a chance that you may want to exit from Vision, from what I'm working on? And the short answer is right now, no, because I just love my work. But one of the comments that was made was, making sure that you have all your financial ducks in a row. And I know you kind of mentioned that it's kind of part of the advisor side of it, of like understanding the Shopify store and understanding Amazon and all your full multi-channel kind of strategy. One thing that they were talking about is, like sellers kind of discretionary earnings and trying to figure out, there's quite a bit. And I know we can really go into the weeds here on the financial side, but, one of the points, that I was advised on was, what you don't want to do is, when you really are ready to sell, unfortunately, you can't make a lot of this mad scrambling when it comes to the financial side, because that's the main crux of the business. Like, do you have product market fit? Is there revenue? Well, let's take a look at the, exactly where the P&L actually sits. And I think the key is working and making sure that you have a really tight financial plan and you're executing on it correctly, and you're not like, a shoebox full of receipts and things and just, semi-winging it, because it just doesn't work like that. So I just want your feedback on the financial health and accounting best practices for e-commerce businesses, so that they're not falling behind when the time is when advisors get involved in looking at the numbers.
Yeah. Look, it's a really key point. And let me take a step back and give you a view as to how Wall Street looks at this.
Okay.
When I worked at Morgan Stanley and we were thinking about taking on a new client that wanted to do an IPO on the stock exchange, the internal committees at an investment bank like Morgan Stanley would not take on a client unless they had a global top tier accountancy firm, such as a KPMG or a PwC, doing the audit. Right. They just wouldn't take it on because they thought there may be a risk buried or skeletons in the closet from a financial perspective.
I can see that.
That's Wall Street, and that's reputation of a firm like Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan. But that same ethos is what we're trying to encourage in order to adopt best practice for deals. So if you want to do a really good deal, in a lot of cases, we've encouraged firms to upgrade their auditor so they get an audit done by a firm with better credentials. Because if you're going to sell to a Procter & Gamble or a large private equity firm, it will be helpful if it's a recognized firm rather than maybe a very small local regional firm. That's sort of one example. But you're right, there's a lot of things that can be done even by having an investment bank like ourselves have a conversation with the CPA, who's the accountant working with the company, or the CFO, etc., by aligning what ultimately the enemy or the buyers want with what the work that's being done on the ground. It's absolutely critical. Again, no battle plans if I was contact with the enemy. That's sort of on the strategic, financial, operational viewpoint of the business. So you got to be teeing it up for what the buyer wants, and having your ducks in a row from a financial perspective is absolutely critical to valuation.
So this is kind of an interesting question that I was thinking about just before recording today, but like, what do buyers actually want out of a Shopify business? Like, is there something very specific? I mean, it's fine if we have our ducks in a row financially and, and a top tier accounting firm kind of making sure that all our ducks in a row financially and it looks good on paper, but like what other things do buyers look for in a business that they may want to acquire?
So let's put financials aside. The first thing most of our acquirers want is they want to buy a brand with a capital B. They don't want to buy products. They want to buy something that can evidence that it's a genuine brand. Is there organic search for the term? Is that really gaining traction? The genuine brands ultimately have longevity and can go full omni-channel in terms of strategy. All right, so the best brands ultimately will become omni-channel as opposed to just live on Shopify or just live on Amazon, etc.
I see. Yeah, so we're talking like getting into retail, and then being like truly multinational, like internationalization, Shopify, all of the social, like selling socially, selling on your direct to consumer, like just being everywhere where the customer could possibly be. That's really what the overall plan is.
Exactly. Online, offline. Offline can be wholesale, can be retail, but ultimately the best brands, that's where they get to. Protection is key. Intellectual property. Are there patents there? Is there a moat around the business, or is it, incredibly competitive? The growth story, the growth opportunities. A lot of the smaller e-commerce businesses don't have financial forecasts, to my surprise. And to really sell a business well, you've got to articulate the growth story, and the financial assumptions and numbers have to back that up. And, it needs to be a win-win for the seller and the buyer. And the buyer needs to sort of see a path to growth. So that's important. And then on the financials, it's obviously in this market, the buyers are looking for revenue growth, and they want to see good, healthy net profits of at least 10%, depending on the category. They want to see a good trajectory of revenue and net profit or EBITDA. So yeah, there's a lot of things. One of the things in buyers love is subscription revenue as opposed to once-off revenue, as I'm sure you know, and that puts the valuation in a whole different stratosphere. So I'd encourage entrepreneurs to go for subscription revenue as much as possible. If they can't, repeat purchase rates and so on are the next best thing.
Well, and I think that whole predictability factor of revenue. I mean, like I said, I've had quite a few. We kind of talked offline before recording, but I had, some coffee companies and coffee replacement type companies, supplement companies, and, just the predictable revenue of having 100,000 subscribers or 500,000 subscribers. That really is literally money in the bank every single month. And then what are we doing to maximize the LTV of those existing customers? Well, they're already there, so we can do our best to avoid churn as best we can. And then what are we doing to drive net new customers based on a very successful pool of existing customers? It's quite interesting business model.
Yeah, agreed.
So one thing I noticed too is I wonder if fundraising for a brand, I could see it being like kind of the first step in some cases before acquisition, because a lot of things you're talking about here, having good financial forecasts and having a growth story and a moat and being truly multi, everywhere, selling everywhere. It's just but typically you would think that maybe you have to sell all of these or have a good story behind all of these things on a fundraising opportunity. But then I'm wondering on the other side of it, is there opportunity in brands that are strictly bootstrapped, where they literally have taken a second mortgage on their house, or they've just over a 10-year period have just kind of parlayed and reinvested profits back into the business? What do you see from your side of just people that have done multiple fundraisings to kind of grow their business? Or do you find maybe the bootstrap entrepreneurs are an interesting group of people to work with also?
Yeah, I think both can be. Give you an example. Last year, we did an exit for a DTC company out of Utah who was doing relatively small revenue, high single-digit millions in revenue, growing fast. The business was called J-Flex Fitness. Good net margins above 20%. And at the time, it was predominantly a Shopify, Steve. So it hadn't yet proved out the omnichannel thesis. It was still relatively small. So you wouldn't expect a business of that size to have done too much of an omnichannel rollout. But it was onto something, and it had a patent protection, high revenue growth, good net margin, super founder, and it got acquired at a very attractive multiple. So deals like that can absolutely get done. If you go up the curve, then we're speaking to a DTC company doing more like 50 million revenue, more omni-channel, wants to come to market in Q1 next year, and so it's hopefully going to begin working with us in next month in June 2024, and we'll have several months doing what I mentioned earlier, early preparation to make sure that they're prepared to hit the ground running in Q1 and hopefully close by maybe the end of H1 next year.
Very cool. I want to talk a bit about your annual conference that you have. I once again, being a good host, I did some research and I found that it seems like there's a group of people that get together in New York annually, and these are acquirers. So these are the people with the money, and they all get together. I'm just curious about like how does this event benefit your clients, and are there any insights that you've gained about what these acquirers are actually looking for when you meet up annually? I'm just curious on, it's kind of behind the curtain, sort of, because I don't get to go to this thing and most people don't get to go. You and 130, 150 others do get to meet up annually. I'm just curious about why you're meeting up and what happens.
Yeah. Well, we saw a gap in the market, Steve, because there was no conference for acquirers of e-commerce businesses up until January of this year. So we decided to plug that gap. And obviously it's really important for the Fortia Group to be close to all of the acquirers so that we can, get the best deals for the entrepreneurs. So next January, we'll have 200 of these acquirers in the room. Think of it as like, 200 people with money, as you mentioned, all in one room. And the real benefit for entrepreneurs is we invite a select number, typically around 5 entrepreneurs who are looking to sell their business. We invite them to pitch to the audience. And there isn't a better forum worldwide than next January to pitch to 200, PE firms, strategics, aggregators of e-commerce businesses. We obviously work with all those firms, prepare them, over several months to get ready for that pitch. But that's the unique benefit for entrepreneurs. The reasons why the acquirers come to the conference is it's the only dedicated conference to help them think about best practice from an acquirer perspective. So think about it from their lens. They want to get better at sourcing deals, doing diligence of deals, understanding valuations, thinking about how to operate the brands post-acquisition, and ultimately thinking about how they sell the brands on when they've held them for a period of time. And we create a great conference agenda to sort of satisfy, those interests. And that's what gets the interesting attendees to turn up.
Very cool. Well, I'll make sure I put a link in the show notes for that. I'm sure there's some kind of a roundup post of something after every event. But yeah, with having 5 potential brands pitch to that kind of group of people is so interesting, that the opportunity is there. And if anything, they get better at, mentioning their story and telling their story. And then and then through the due diligence, I think you just get better over time. And I think that's great. You pitch it, you see what happens, you learn from it. I think it's just like fundraising where, it's you have to be okay with doors closing and slamming in your face or being ghosted. It's just part of the deal. And, I think acquirers, they have certain types of deals they're looking for. And, they're not all meant for every acquirer. As great as the business might be, they just maybe don't have the experience to be able to want to manage it. And so, interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And, timing in business can be everything. Sometimes it's all about knowing which acquirer has just raised assets to invest and needs to put assets to work, or who's under pressure to invest some of their existing money, or which private equity firm owns a pet business that now has firepower to acquire smaller pet businesses as bolt-ons. All of those sorts of things are what, the job of my team to be aware of, and that helps us ultimately match the right seller and buyer.
I see. Okay, cool. So let's talk about this. We mentioned at the top of the show, but the whole flirt, date, marry approach to deal making. So can you I've never heard this before. It seems interesting. So can you explain the meaning behind this practice, and then why taking time, I guess, to find the right fit, do you believe is kind of crucial for entrepreneurs that are considering an exit if you go through the flirt, the date, and the marry approach?
Yeah, I think it's always nice to bring it back to sort of simple examples. It's no surprise that for good marriages, flirt, date, marry is the right approach, right? And it's therefore helpful to explain deal making is absolutely no different. There's no way you're going to shake hands with a buyer tomorrow, even if you've got the best businesses in the world, because that company needs to do their diligence and so on, and you need to explore other potential acquirers. So the other key reason that we really like the approach is a lot of the acquirers, Steve, especially say strategics or large corporates, they're like oil tankers. They move very slowly. They won't close a deal in 6 weeks or 3 months. And we like the flirt, date, marry approach because it allows us to get those types of firms into the process. So what I mean is, if we have an initial teaser, if you want to exit, say in the first half of next year, we would be saying to clients, let's get a teaser in front of them after Labor Day of this year. And it doesn't have to disclose all the sensitive financials, etc. But let's get on their radar. Let's start flirting. Right. Let's get them excited, and let's get them and their colleagues internally saying, you know what, this is a super business that's coming to market in Q1. We've got to get it on their agenda. We've got to, meet the founder in his or her office. We've got to, do a conference call with their head of supply chain or whatever it might be. And so yeah, that's a key benefit. It allows us to get slow moving acquirers onto our timeline. Frankly, another benefit is it allows us to identify all of the right acquirers. We know lots of private equity firms and aggregators, because they look at multiple deals in different categories. But if someone comes to me and says, this is our subcategory niche, let's just say it's, for argument's sake, just sports equipment. I and any other advisor that tells you they know every strategic company, small, medium, large, that might buy a sports equipment company is talking BS. And so, but give us time, and we have the process and approach and energy to go and find all the right people in tandem with our client and start getting them on the radar. So hopefully those examples sort of bring it to life.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's the thing. I knew the concept of it, but it's interesting how it applies, but it makes complete sense about how it applies with, hey, if you're ready, we can't rush it. Like it was like an actual dating relationship to being married. Like you can't rush it. And, once again, when we're talking millions of dollars changing hands, it's very interesting that you have to be patient, but you have to have all your ducks in a row, all the things we talked about already. Are you truly multi-channel right now? Do you have a moat and a growth story and some financial forecasts and some finances that are tied up nicely and accounted for correctly with a tier 1 accounting firm? All of these things I think really make a difference. I think that's some of the takeaways I'm thinking right now. What happens for a brand founder that's getting close to saying, hey, you know what, I've had enough, or I have a new opportunity I want to explore, and hey, I wouldn't mind getting a big chunk of money and having it moved on to someone else who can bring it to a whole nother level potentially. And so what do you say to these founders when they've put their heart and their soul kind of into building their business? Because I believe it would be very emotionally challenging, I think, to saying, hey, what's the process now? How do we make sure that they feel like they're getting a good deal and they feel that maybe the legacy of what they've built continues on? So because you've obviously been involved with a lot of these, and it is emotionally charged, but how do you make the brand and the founder feel good that everything is flowing correctly and this is going to continue on kind of past them?
Yeah, the Fortia Group is my fourth startup, so I totally understand the blood, sweat, and tears that go into the life of the entrepreneur. And when you build your baby, you want to, you're nervous and you want to make sure it goes to a good home and you get the just reward. Right. I totally hear you on all those points. It's a very emotional, highly charged time. I think the first thing I'd say is don't go it alone. And of course, I would say that, but I wouldn't try and run an e-commerce brand on my own. I wouldn't know what to do. I'm an investment banker. What the hell would I know? But I wouldn't advise someone who knows an e-commerce brand from an operational perspective to know what to do in order to get the best deal. And there's research to back that up. So there was a really interesting study, the largest study ever done of small company M&A deals that analyzed over 3,000 deals over a 10-year period. And they found that by hiring a good M&A advisor, you can get up to 25% higher valuation. So, but it's not just about the valuation. It's also like running an M&A process is like having, if you do it yourself, it's like having a day job on top of the day job, just like it is when you raise equity or debt on your own. And we want our clients running the business, not the process. Because, it's so important that during due diligence, your business continues to go as well as possible. That's the best thing the entrepreneur can do to help a deal get across the line and at a very good price. So leave it to the experts. That's what we're here. We're your right arm, your right hand to hold your hand, and guide you through an 8-step process that I've been doing for 25 years. Have raised $20 billion worth of finance with. And again, as an entrepreneur, I'm not just a boring investment banker or geeky investment banker. I've started businesses myself, so I understand it from both sides of the table.
wonder about, AI is another interesting topic right now. And I want to kind of pique your interest on this one, but like what role do you see AI and kind of automation kind of, in the future of e-commerce and because a lot of brands are really thinking about and how they can apply AI, and does that give them an edge over their competitors in, moving forward? And then is that just a shiny object syndrome, or is that really something that's valuable to the business? Because I know a lot of people aren't really executing on the highest level right now with AI powered, kind of marketing tools and different other tools that are available through AI. Are you seeing that having that, does that create a better moat for the business? And are you kind of advocating to saying, hey, you're doing a lot of great work today, but we believe that, hey, there are some AI tools that can help maybe, net acquire new customers cheaper. There can be things on inventory and forecasting that can be, analyzing data more efficiently. I just want to have your feedback on how you believe AI is potentially impacting the long-term growth and then eventual exit and valuations of a business.
I think it's the job of the CEO and management team to, always be promiscuous and be looking for ways to improve their business, whether it's driving revenue or cutting costs. And I think there's definitely third-party AI businesses that can drive efficiencies, whether it's on, listings or various things. But they are third-party. Yeah. I don't see many examples where a brand is big enough to have its own, internal AI strategy with CTOs and, engineers. And that's more for marketplaces and AI tech and SaaS businesses, I think, to build and then serve the brands. But I think, financials are key, net margins are key. Can some of these AI tools make the business more efficient, which means hiring less people and having better net margins, etc.? Yes, I think so. I wouldn't want to stand still. I'd want to have a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset, and be continually looking for ways to improve the business.
Yeah. I would add too, I know one AI tool that's been really helping businesses a lot is kind of the self-serve model through customer service. There's a lot of kind of questions that are being asked by a lot of customers through the brand, like what's my tracking number? Do you ship to Canada? Where's my order? What's your return policy? There's a lot of things that you don't really need a human for. There's an answer. You can crawl your frequently asked questions and have the brand's bot through an AI tool to kind of give the answer. If it's not necessarily the final answer, then, you want to chat with a live agent? Click here, and it continues on. So I think having a self-serve model, I think, is really helpful. And that's one way through AI that I know has been a big win for the brands that I've managed.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So before we kind of wrap up for today, what do you think are kind of our next steps for those people that are listening today? If they're getting value out of the fact that, hey, if acquisition's on your mind, you really have to think that this is going to happen a year from now. And so, the best time to think about, a potential exit is like right now, probably, because there's lots of things that need to be kind of set up in a row. And as you said, this whole flirt, date, marry kind of concept, like there's things to be done, there's relationships to be built, and it's going to take some time. So what are we thinking as our next steps for those listening that like, hey, yeah, I'm in that position. I have product market fit. I'm multinational now, and I'm omni-channel. I'm out there doing my thing, and I'm on Amazon. I think I might be ready for an exit if the price is right and the right acquirer is there. What do you say to them, and where do we want to send people to learn more?
Yeah, I think if you're thinking about an exit on a 1 to even 3 year time frame, it's worth having a discussion with a firm like the Fortea Group. I think the saying "prepare to fail, fail to prepare" is genuine. And one of the quotes, Steve, apologies I didn't mention earlier on, is probably the most famous quote or the most important quote in M&A is, the best businesses get bought, not sold. And if you're doing early preparation and you're effectively becoming ready to sell at the appropriate time, when we're doing that flirt, date, marry, we can invite people to make bids to take you off the market before you go and do the formal marketing or competitive auction. And that's a really neat trick, because a lot of these acquirers in some cases don't want you to go to market. They just want to give a good, genuine offer to the entrepreneur, get it off the market and take it for themselves. So there's lots of reasons that we've covered today regarding the benefits of early preparation. And for your listeners, I'd be very happy to, if people reach out to the fortiagroup.com, very happy to discuss these points in more detail and tailor it to their needs.
Lovely. Well, what I'll do is I'll have what I call a pretty link. So it'll be ecommercefastlane.com/the Fortia Group. And that will redirect to a landing page on your site, or you can just go directly. I'll have all those details in the show notes. This has been really eye-opening. It's a very unique episode for me because I think it's a topic that's not discussed very much. And I think and that's kind of the reason why I want to have on the show today. I want to make sure that people understand that there is an opportunity here as you build your business, what potentially can happen on an exit. It's something completely different that I believe a lot of entrepreneurs don't even realize, all the checks and balances that have to be in place to kind of make the transaction, worthwhile for both parties. And there's a lot of things that need to get done over the next year or 2 years before a successful exit. But I think the Fortia Group really has things kind of ironed out now about how we can do that. So I appreciate you coming on the show today. Like I said, details in the show notes. You can go directly there, and Emmett and his team will be able to take care of you. So once again, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, have yourself a great afternoon. Well, that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank you personally for being a loyal listener of E-commerce Fastlane. It's my hope that this podcast is offering you a ton of value through growth strategies, tactics, and exclusive insider tips on the best Shopify apps and marketing platforms, all with my personal goal to help you build, manage, grow, and scale a successful and thriving company powered by Shopify. Thanks for investing some time today and listening to the show. I'm so proud and excited that you have a growth mindset and are a constant learner. I truly appreciate you and your entrepreneurial journey. Enjoy the rest of the week and keep thriving with Shopify.